Okay, it is noon, high noon. Election day, Tuesday, high noon, Pacific Standard Time, and this is the Architects and Heroes live stream show. Now, we always say things like, we have a very special guest, because they're all special to us. But who we have today on this very special election day version of the Architects and Heroes live stream show is somebody who has been what I like to refer to as an impresario in San Francisco nightlife for well past the past 10 years. We have Jeremy Bispo from As You Like It. Jeremy, how are you?
I'm good. Good afternoon. Thank you.
Good afternoon and welcome to the show, my friend.
Thank you.
It is great to see your face. It is great to see anybody in this time of pandemic. It's especially great to bring some light and some levity and some vibes to this particular day. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Yeah, it's a day for all of us, and I'm excited to be here with you. And I've really enjoyed your previous Architects and Heroes, and you've had some of my good friends on, so I was excited and honored to be invited. So thank you.
Well, I really appreciate you being here. And we, this whole experience with live streaming, I'd really not done anything like this before. It was literally an outgrowth of, it's pandemic time and there's nowhere to go and there's really nothing to do. So how do we, function socially in some way, shape, or form? And honestly, it's just been such a great experience for me to have all of these super talented promoters and producers and DJs and artists come on that it's just, it's been a really natural progression. I actually, we had last week we had devouring, and I know that, he recently did an event for you, a streaming event, correct?
Right. He was part of our monthly Coast to Coast series for Los Angeles. Mark is a very old friend. Back when he was Mark Forager is the artist name. And he's been with us with As You Like It from the beginning. So it was only natural to bring him into that type of event to kind of the connection between LA and San Francisco and holding on to that. So it was great to see that episode. I watched that too. And he's quite a personality. I don't quite have that kind of personality. So it's, I won't be bringing that to the table, but I'm happy to be here today. So thank you.
Absolutely. Well, listen, I know many people, especially within the Bay Area, know you from the As You Like It events and series. Can you talk a little bit, because we're going on 10 years. I know that you guys have a 10-year anniversary coming up. But can you tell me a little bit about your life prior to founding As You Like It and your experience in sort of the underground club rave community and how it got you to where you are today?
Of course. It all started when I was 18 years old, and my friend John brought me to a party in Monterey at a rock gym. It was produced by Cloudfactory Collective, and I had grown up in Pacific Grove, so I'd been invited to these parties in the Bay, and they were all a little too far for a newbie. I didn't really know what I was getting myself into. I was enjoying the music, and I was enjoying the people that I were meeting that were going to these events, but I wasn't quite ready to make that trek. I went that first night. I didn't even make it through the whole night, and I left probably around 2:30 or 3. But I went again a few weeks later to a much bigger event at what was called Home Base, and with Superstar DJ Kyoki as the headliner. I went again, I believe it was like 3 weeks later, to an underground. I think I went about 3 weeks later to another party, and then I think I went one more time in March. And by that point, I already knew that I wanted to start producing events. So I volunteered, and I just wanted to help make it happen. It was big for me to meet new people that had no history of who I was, where my family was, what my background was. I was this new person that stood on my own 2 feet, and opinions were being made based off of who I was. And that was the great thing about the community back then. You were who you brought to the table, and that really carried me in that wanting to contribute. That was March. By September, we had already thrown our first party. Through that summer, I was regularly volunteering for events, devouring the culture, still making the drive from the Monterey to the Bay Area. Felt like weekly. It was probably every couple of weeks, every 3 weeks at most. Sometimes I wouldn't even know how I was going to get home. I just knew how I was going to get up there. I would pay someone to drive me to San Jose, and then I get a ride from San Jose to Daly City. I'd have somewhere to stay in Daly City. Then I get a ride to Berkeley, had some place to stay in Berkeley, and this became the cycle. That first party we threw was a beach party at what's called the Pit, and probably a couple hundred people made the drive and came out for it. There was something about the spirit of having a team to put this together, and this idea that we created this night for people, where I was just kind of hooked. In high school, I had put on events of different scales. I helped organize prom. I helped organize things for like conferences on school, fundraisers for different events. And I had always kind of had this brain that kind of thought in those ways, where to me it's like a puzzle, and like you just look at the different pieces of the puzzle, and if you can bring them all together, and every event kind of has the same structure to it, and you move the parts in and out. And after that September event, I knew immediately that I wanted to move to the Bay. I was really over the drive, over the uncertainty of not knowing how I was going to get home. And so I started working on that move. I ended up moving in May of '98. The party that we were throwing was called ASR, which was originally stood for Alvarado Street Ravers. It was a nickname given to us by Cloudfactory for my friends and that all hung out downtown Monterey and Alvarado. Once I moved to the Bay, the party kind of came with me. I moved into a house that was a party house that had its own nickname before I arrived there, and we really got entrenched in the rave world. I soon though started to get exhausted by that life, struggling to find work and struggling to find a way. So I started to look to go back to school. I started to look to and then the tech boom happened, and I got into that world for a bit. I moved from company to company and went back to school, community college, and then still continued to throw parties on various scales, generally on smaller scales and free parties and outdoor events. So I had a deep knowledge of what the Bay Area was. I kind of got it at that point. I was preparing to transfer out of the community college, and you looked to move to Minnesota. I'd always had a lot of Midwest friends that were here in the Bay Area that were into the techno scene, so that was a very natural thing for me. I made that move, and it didn't go as well as I had thought it was going to, but it did introduce me to DVS1, who I met on my first night there, who became a very good friend, and then in the time since became very integral to As You Like It and introducing us to Ben Clock and different types of events we've done over the years. So those were all kind of pre-As You Like It days that kind of fed into what we've done the last 10 years.
So here we are now. Your Midwest experiment happened. You've been in the Bay Area. I know that it's culturally could not be more different, but I do know that there's lots of an exchange, especially with the San Francisco Bay Area. At one point, I think John Santos, who was a staple of the scene for a long time, and Chris Douglas, and sort of this that crop of kind of abstract laptop musicians and early techno, San Francisco techno people had moved or had a home base in Detroit as well. And so there was this exchange between the Midwest rave culture and what was happening in the Bay Area. And so you found yourself on the other end of this Midwest experiment, and then you're back in the Bay Area. What were sort of the seeds and the origin for what happened with As You Like It?
When I got back, you got to remember it's 2008 and the economy is horrible. And, you know, Obama had not been elected yet. I had worked on the Obama campaign when I was living in Minneapolis and had done a caucus coordinator and done some door-to-door stuff and done calls, and they had taken us to Indiana, and I worked in Wisconsin on the campaign. And so I came back with this mindset, this like political mindset of like being active. And I very briefly did some work with this organization called Color or Change. And then the contract ran out, and then it was like, well, what's next? What am I going to do? And I was like, well, let's just get the crew back together. Let's throw a party, because like I don't know what else I'm going to do. And I got ASR back together, and it became very obvious through that first night and that first experiment that old crew was not interested. And I got very, I got deep in it, because I felt like if I was going to ask anyone to come to Oakland to go to a party, then I was going to have to get to know them and get to know the community and why they should make that trip across the bay. I really fell in love with the compound, and it was a venue that was in Bayview, and it was so intimate and beautiful, and it was exactly everything that I had always wanted the underground to be before I left. It never really was. It was full of heads. There were music people. It was a cultural experience, and you heard music that really had no business to be played in a room that small. And I immediately got drawn to that. I met one of my best friends, Yasmin, around that period. And Yasmin acted as kind of an intermediary for me, as well as Jason Short, who was very active back then under a label called Oralism, and Greg Bird, who I'd known since the early 2000s. So these three people kind of, and also Pookie and Danielle, they really acted as these connectors to me to this new world that I had like stepped into that was so different than the world that I had left. When I moved to Minnesota. So okay, let's put our fingers in the water and let's see. I wasn't even ready to put my feet in the water yet. I was really just feeling it and just seeing how it felt. And then like before I even put my foot in the water, I just dove. And like at that point, I was getting ready to do after that first event with Robert Hood, who Zach had introduced us to. I was ready to throw a party in San Francisco, and I did an event at the compound. That was in January of 2010. By April, we were doing another one. By June, we were doing another one. By the end of August, that's where we launched As You Like It, and we ended ASR. And then from that point, it was just on. And that's what it kind of felt like. It felt like there was just there was this switch that happened. The switch really happened in June. But like once that happened, it was like my sleep schedule was completely off. I was up all night talking to agents in Europe. I really started to dig into what was happening. The Wolf and Lamb kind of post minimal deep house sound combined with the kind of Bear Gine kind of techno sound was really kind of what pulled me in different directions. They kind of activated my brain. And we booked No Regular Play that June. Later, we booked Nicholas Jarre for his San Francisco debut. Then awesome. we first club night just a little bit later, a few months later, with Ben Clock. And so it was just like I got my hands and kind of we were everywhere. And at that point, it was a party there was times where we're doing 3 a month, and generally every month. We've done over. This last August, it was like 200 events over the course of that. So over 9 years, it was 200 events.
That's a lot.
Yeah, it really was a lot. I don't know how we did it. I don't know how my business partner Jeremy Linden was in it too. Like we were going for it. We really fell in love with the music, and I fell in love with the community. It was just like these were heads. These were people who were taking the music home and listening to the music at home and spending as much time as I was. That really changed with the end of the underground when we were going into bigger shows, and we were able to balance the types of shows. It's one reason why we never stuck to one venue. And I thought that was very important to like our overall what we did. The vibe we brought to the party was that it moved, it changed. I knew that it had to be different at F8 versus an underground versus Public Works versus Monarch, and that ability to kind of move, as well as just go back to those earlier days of when I was a kid and the music that I was really into, and being able to book some of my heroes like Doc Martin and Derek Carter and Lauren Garnet and Jeff Mills, and then being able to book James Murphy, who was really integral to me keeping involved with dance music when I was in Minneapolis, when I really started to get bored. So yeah, it's been an adventure.
I think about this, and 10 years is I think rave years are even more of a multiplier effect than dog years, right? So if a dog year is 7 years, rave years is like, those are like 10 lifetimes in every year, especially considering the intensity of the community, the types of activities that go on in and around club culture and club life. Longevity is a rare and special thing to have, especially with maintaining the quality of the event, the sanity of the people involved, all of these different factors that come into play. What would you attribute the longevity of As You Like It?
Whether I held on to my sanity, that's a different question. So let's say that. I would say,
well, whatever it's worth, you're in really good company, my friend. Very. Yeah. In fact, I'm just going to say, I know quite a few people that are orbiting around that, there's not a lot of sanity left. So
yeah,
you're doing great.
It's difficult to there's definitely mental health struggles that happen through nightlife, the community, and like there's support systems that get built that kind of nurture that ability to have those longevities, those intimate relationships, those smaller, tighter communities that happen within the bigger picture. And so those are the things that those networks, and building a family, which is what it was always like. What I envisioned was that like we had a core family, and then from the family it went out, and then it went out, and then it went out. And like when you get that kind of buy-in from people who are both invested in me personally, invested in the party that we're doing, invested in the community as a whole, things can get a lot easier. And there was Jeremy was like a rock at times. My ex-girlfriend Sarah was very integral at other times. There was moments of just knowing how to, or learning how to rather, learning how to take care of yourself, knowing when to say when, and when you don't have to be somewhere, and when you do have to be somewhere. And early on, I had to be everywhere, and it got to a point where I sometimes only had to show face. Sometimes I just had to appropriately reach out and let someone know that, hey, I'm not going to be making it, but I appreciate what you're doing. Those were things that learning those moments and how to do that. There was also breaks in it where Johnny and I were throwing, because within those 10 years, for 2 years, Johnny Egas and I were throwing a party called Rare Form in Oakland. For another year and a half or so, Jordy and Trevor and I were throwing a party called Mixed Forms at the Stud. So those types of breaks to As You Like It provided me with this kind of lift of like the roots of what it is. And as long as I was able to hold on to those roots and hold on to like the spirit of it, I was able to kind of adapt and go with the flow with As You Like It. I mean, I would say the last 4 years have been quite difficult since the fire. So the fact that we've made it these 10 years is something. There was many moments where I didn't expect it to happen, but then there was also moments where like, what else am I going to do? And I built this. I built this creature, and now it's time for me to run it. And now it's moved in a direction that I never saw it coming. Not 4 years ago that I would be sitting here preparing to launch a record label, and like that was the evolution that is keeping this kind of going.
You know, it seems like, you know, you alluded to the ghost ship fire that happened 4 years ago, and just absolute tragedy that happened there. And it seems like there have been a series of inflection points along the way, you know, at the beginning and starting with As You Like It, and then moving forward. So, you know, maybe we can go back and talk about, you know, those inflection points for you, and how, you know, you managed to kind of shepherd As You Like It into this new and frankly uncharted territory of launching a label in the middle of a pandemic during a time of social unrest and definition around Black Lives Matter. There are just so many different elements that come into play, but it's also kind of a natural extension. So maybe talk about some of those inflection points of what happened, and how you know, from that point to right now, you got to the place where you were able to take this and evolve it into what is going to be, you know, yet another chapter of what it is.
Sure. Breaking it down in chapters is a funny way to think about it, but there definitely were chapters. You know, whether it was the launch out of the underground, when the underground, and it was like underground 222 high, like Control, like they were in like full bloom. You know, Dirty Bird was doing the picnics. There was a lot of people going out looking for a lot of things to do, and a younger crowd that was into it. Then, you know, flash forward not that far, where we were then starting to do clubs, and there was less undergrounds and more clubs. There was holding on to that kind of underground at times, and then there was a moment where we were asked to throw a party in a different city, and that we threw our first party at that point in Detroit. That was in 2012. I want to say, or was it 11? 11? So yeah, I think it was 11. So we did a party in Detroit. It was called Shit Show 3. It was with a crew called Gary Springs Hunting Club, and it was an all-day event. It was a huge learning experience of dealing with the politics of Detroit and dealing with that world, and just dealing with the world outside of our bubble. We were then asked to stick around and throw a party at Smart Bar the following weekend. So we stuck around in Chicago, and we threw a first party at Smart Bar. Nate Sider invited us through Tyrell. We had our residence at that event. That was our first of what ended up being 5 events in Chicago. We did events in Washington, D.C., at U Street Hall with our friend Chris Nitti. We did parties with Diego Marnelli at the Set Safe, at the Electric Pickle in Miami. We were invited to Hot Mass by Aaron Clark. We did a party there. We did a party in Vancouver with Move D, with Subversive. And there was just this feeling of just like looking outwardly. Like we were internally looking for so long and bringing the culture to the Bay. Then it got to a point where people felt like we had something to offer their cities. And I never really was looking for that necessarily. But when the relationships form and you start to have those connections, it becomes very natural. And that became there was a period there where that was very, very important to what I felt, to what we were doing, by showcasing our residents, by working with artists that we had these relationships with, whether it was Pachanga Boys at Smart Bar, or whether it was Omar S at Smart Bar, and or Silent Servant in Miami. That it's just about being connected and remaining connected, and that is really what's led into like a lot of what's happening now through the pandemic with these coast to coast events. Definitely comes back to that period of time. I would say that the next event really was the Ghost Ship Fire, and that was a shock to the system. It was beyond anything that I've ever experienced in my life. Losing Johnny and Amanda and Chelsea, and the rest of the community, they were all doers. They were the people who made things happen. So we just lost in one swoop this entire world of doers, and at the same time losing that type of event at the same time. So we were left then with clubs, which we would do it. There was something to be got out of it. There was something to share, but it wasn't the same. And so there was a grieving process. So not only a grieving of losing all of those people and how much they meant to all of us and all the individuals in the community, but also then a grief of the loss of the underground. And that we were left with in San Francisco these after hours experiences. And that after hours is different than an underground. An underground is like a very intentional experience. You plan for the night. You buy a pre-sale. You don't just happen to end up there because you're drunk. So that loss of intention behind the events changed the events to being kind of more show focused, where we were looking at trying to piece together these dynamic lineups that were on par with, I guess, Live Nation, or our version of that scale of events. And we really kind of peaked out with our 7-year, which was a very dynamic event we did at the Midway. After that, we did our last of our parties in other cities. We did 2 in Los Angeles, one of which was a release party for Johnny Egas, and one of which was the Mole. We brought the Mole to LA, who's one of my favorite artists, and I've been trying to convince to come to America at that point for some years. So we did a party in SF in LA, and with Dig Deeper, the Mole, and with Acid Camp with Chrissy and Kendig for Johnny's release. Going forward, there was a lot of it was just kind of going through the motions and figuring out what still excites me. And the Stud really excited me. The community behind the Stud and the collective, and how much work that they had put in to keep culture alive in the Bay Area. In many ways, that became kind of a calling. At that point, Steve Johnson at Underground SF had hired me to manage his calendar. So then that became, in connection with the Stud, that ability to kind of work on the grassroots and contribute and help new promoters get better, open the door to people, give people new opportunities. It didn't have to be behind my brand and my word. It became their word and their brands, and they got to build within themselves. And that mentorship that I had gotten when I was younger, I then was able to pass on at that point. So that was definitely a chapter there. I was still very much deep in grief and still very much working through a lot, and not, as you like, it wasn't really ready to rebloom, I guess. I started to come out of that in winter, and we had some huge plans for events for this year, probably as the more dynamic and more diverse as we've had since 2015. And that included the launch of the label, which was going to be the next chapter. And obviously, we were hit with a pandemic in March, the weekend after my birthday, and it just kind of like everything. I saw it happening. I knew what was happening in front of me. No one else wanted to have the difficult conversations at the moment. The shows were going to be canceled. There weren't going to be makeup dates. We needed to get refunds. How are we going to handle this? How are we going to handle the closing? And eventually those conversations started happening, and those shows just started to fall and fall and fall. And these last 8 months now have been very much about the label and the Coast to Coast series with Fall Radio, and a reconnection with Andy Kershaw, who was part of As You Like in those earlier years and came back involved, and he's now the label manager for the label. So, and Kylie and Kennedy, who's been very active in our social media. So there's been this new team and building a new world, and this is the new chapter that feels like it's just being written, and I don't know what's coming up. I know what I want to come up. I don't know what is coming. I know what I've learned in the past, and I know that will influence what's happening in the future. I know there's a lot that I don't know yet, and being kind of a sponge and attempting to make myself just open to what everyone, open to the environment, open to the world. And now when you mention like Black Lives Matter, and like those were, there was always going to be elements of the label that included kind of social justice. And so that kind of fed into that very naturally, and it just kind of gave a path for it to happen. So the new environment we're in is definitely impacting and influencing what's happening going forward, and with the hope that at the end, or at some point within the next couple of years, we'll have shows again, and this music that people are making is now can be played. But now it's a matter of being relevant and connecting and sharing music and giving people a voice, because it's their voice that matters more than my voice. I mean, this is pretty foreign to me. Being here on camera and talking is not the natural state. I'd rather amplify others than amplify myself.
Well, sometimes you need to be amplified too, right? Because at the end of the day, you're literally the person running around behind the scenes, kind of facilitating all this. And I personally feel, and someone who's spent years and years, like, in the underground world, putting shows together, organizing things, coordinating talent, doing all the things that basically make it happen. Sometimes it's nice to be able to share your perspective in a different way. And I feel like, based on what you were saying, first of all, I just want to take a moment and recognize the lives that were lost in the ghost ship fire. That was such a tragedy. And I didn't know any of them personally because it had been years since I'd been in the Bay Area, but I knew of them by name, and I knew of them by their impact in the larger underground dance music community in San Francisco. And I know that was just a huge, huge loss. And I just want to stop and kind of pay, recognition to the people that were lost in that. And then, going forward from Ghost Ship and where we are now, which, sequentially, if you were to look at this on paper, it just feels like it's such a paradigm shift for any type of community of artists that gather in any sector. So generally arts and entertainment, but to be able to kind of take where we are now and use it, the time that we have, as wisely as possible. A lot of conversations that I've had with different people, even on the show, has revolved around, with Sean Horton, who's the founder of the Decibel Festival up in Seattle, who's now here in LA. He was saying, one of the things that he's seen as a result of the live streaming, kind of rapid implementation of this live streaming technology, now there's going to be this whole other channel once we do get back into these live, in-person events, that there's now going to be this opportunity to have the infrastructure set up to have that streaming platform, right? I know that As You Like It has been very active in podcasting. I know that As You Like It is moving into the label arena and the record label arena, and you're sort of really creating a community of people that are creating things in multiple channels. And I'm wondering if you could talk about sort of the podcasting, the things that you're doing with Fault Radio, and then kind of by extension how that turns into, you know, a platform for your label.
Sure, of course. I mean, thank you for taking the moment. Yeah, that was a huge impact on the community. It's hard to put words to it, really, how it felt in those moments afterwards. And so coming out of that, there was this kind of this feeling of coming inwardly, looking inwardly, and with that, things started to bubble up. We had already had our existing podcast, which we'd had since the early days, that we run with William Wardlaw, who's part of our team, and then Fault Radio kind of showed up on the horizon.
Shout out to Dora Wand.
Yeah, shout out to Dora and Dundee. What they brought to the Bay Area, it wasn't new. Like, I remember the days of Groove Tech and Beta Lounge and Techno State.
Oh, Beta Lounge, sure. Shout out to Ian. What's up? Brian, and Ian. What's up, guys?
I mean, that era of streaming radio and streaming broadcast was something that I came up on. So Real Player and all of that. So, you know, there was an era of an organization called Synergize, which was briefly, that was in the on 11th Street, just up from Audio, and you know, that happened for a while, and we did a few broadcasts from there. So it was always something we were kind of looking into and thought was important, having a presence in that way. When artists would come to town, when we'd have a friend or an artist who would be around for a little bit, or we'd connect them to Fault and we'd have them to broadcast. And I became kind of a hub for some artists who are coming through and say, hey, let's give them, like, I'm trying to build what Fault's doing and giving them access to these artists that were from other cities. And we had some really fun ones with Session Victim and Dez and Dress from Detroit. And so that there was already that kind of relationship there. Tragically, we were hit with another loss shortly after the lockdown. Jeffrey Tillman, who was very integral to our world, and he was a door person for us, and he was just a great friend. He was a soldier, and like he passed away from cancer. And we decided, since we couldn't get together, this was in April, we couldn't get together, we're going to do a streaming memorial for him. And when I realized that we could do a streaming memorial and have people in other cities and be a part of it, I kind of, a light went off, and I was like, well, how can we extrapolate that to showcase in these other cities? And then from then, it's like, how do we showcase San Francisco and our relationship to the outside world in during this period when we're so isolated and we're so cut off and we can't go out? How do we remain connected? And I just looked around. I was like, okay, we did one in Portland, we did one in Pittsburgh, we did one in Washington, D.C., we did one in Atlanta and Seattle. And so there was each one featured local artists, as well as artists that was from the Bay that had a connection to that city. And that was really important. That connection point was really important to me, that the local people had a reason to watch. The people from that city had a reason to be excited about their friends getting new content, new videos are streaming, more content for Fault Radio. Obviously, the Twitch world happened. Streaming was happening everywhere, and we that was a monthly that we had going. About halfway through the process, I realized that I was having more artists that I wanted to showcase than I had room for in these broadcasts, and that came with the addition of a new podcast called Ground Level. And the Ground Level series became about showcasing additional artists in that city, having a brief 5-question interview, and then having them come out over the course of the month. This is all new content. This is like basically I kind of coined that term in the middle of this. It was a multimedia cultural creator, and that's really what I was looking to turn As You Like It into. And that's what I'm looking to what we're going to be going forward is, yes, there's going to be new streams. That's going to remain relevant. Yes, there's going to be events, hopefully with dance floors. Yes, there's going to be a radio. Then we also launched AYLI Radio in the middle of that with Sutro, which we use mostly as a way to showcase Bay Area Black artists, some of which are going to be artists that are going to be a part of releases that we have coming forward. Some of them, and then also the artists that are a part of the first releases. So Tin Man and Christina and Tape Ghost, those artists are going to be a part of this. And then we were putting out the podcast for the interviews. Chris Saldua does our interviews for our regular podcast series. Shout out Chris Saldua. Thank you. Like, he provides a level of professionalism to that process. So we just kind of started to have these different elements, like platforms, that we could cross promote what we were doing. We could amplify voices that we wouldn't have had the space otherwise, in a moment where people are at home and having more time to listen. And, it's hard to get. Then with all of the podcasts that are happening out there, what was it about us that was how were we going to stand out amongst all of that? And I had to trust that, like, our voice was uniquely different in what our vision was for it, that the right people in the heads would catch on early, and then it would kind of grow from there. And then at that point, you have a backwardly looking, hey, this is cool. I just heard about this. What else have they done? And that's that experience. Or, hey, I know about this SoundCloud. This is new on them. What else is there? So there was these different ways of new avenues into what As You Like It is, and new places for for artists to have a voice in a period where so many of us are feeling voiceless.
And I think that is such a it's funny. And we've chatted about this offline as well in different conversations that we've had since we've really gotten to know each other, which ironically has been during the pandemic. So, good things can come out of bad when you're socially isolated, I suppose. But we have had this conversation before about different labels, collectives, brands that are bringing something fully, wholly unique to the table. They somehow managed to retain the integrity of the type of music and design and aesthetic that they were kind of rooted in that underground sense, but are global brands. They extend far beyond the normal reach of, say, your average rave crew or whatever that's regional and whatever, and brings people in. So I'm thinking of Dirty Bird. Dirty Bird has an excellent sort of platform and way of getting things out there, and the integrity of what they do is so firmly rooted in underground music and its core tenets, if you will, right? They do an excellent job of it. Ghostly International, wow, like that they definitely have a certain aesthetic and are able to be a global brand. When I think of As You Like It, I look at the potential of that being sort of, that kind of brand, right? Where you have this it's all rooted in this incredibly well-produced music and in the dance club culture and bringing people together and that sort of sense of community, but extending it beyond. Is that in your head? Is that where you see As You Like It going?
I mean, whether we get there or not, or whether we're going there, I don't know yet. Whether there are inspirations, definitely. I would add Compact to that also. Even Ninja Tune in a way. But Ghostly was a huge inspiration for me. That diversity of sound, and the roots of Ann Arbor, and holding on to Sam was very true. He held on. He worked with people that he had those relationships with, that went to U of M, that had those Detroit roots. So, and then Barclay did the same thing with Dirty Bird. They built their staple of residence artists, and they kind of built outwardly from there. And when you kind of come with that to the table. You're like, hey, this is what I've got, and what do you think? And allow those people to mature and grow and change as artists. I hope to get there. I hope that we have that kind of longevity more than anything. I feel that San Francisco has a voice and that should be heard. Like it, we've earned it at this point. And and so so many artists are forgot about that. Hey, they're from San Francisco, or they spent a decade there, or that hopefully being a hub for that connectivity between those artists that live in other cities, that have lived here, because really the label's focus is going to be around San Francisco. It's going to be a long time before we're really even considering artists releasing original music from artists that don't live here or have no relationship to the city. We'll have remixes, and that's also very important because that just builds the platform to get the voices heard from these local artists. But it's really, there's this kind of inwardly looking, outwardly showing point of what I think that this next at least period is going to be. And if the rest of the world buys in, which I think that there's hope. That's all I have is hope and trust in the local arts, trust in the local community, trust that they're going to support us as we make these changes, as we now launch merch with t-shirts and masks and hoodies coming, and we're going to start working with local artists to design custom, not custom, but like design shirts that are, some of them are affiliated to releases, some of them won't be. These new, going into these new cultural paths, if it grows and it nurtures and we put the right foundation, then I hope that that's where we can go, because I've invested so much into this world, this life, in this community, in myself, in my evolution in this place, that I feel like not only do I owe it to Johnny to do this, like I said I was going to, but I owe it to myself to at least try, and to the local art scene to do my best by them. They've given me so much. Like I owe it to them to do my best by them, and I hope this next period shows that. And I'm learning and I'm growing, and we're all learning and we're growing, especially in this crazy world on election day.
On election day, I want to talk about this step in your evolution a little bit. Can you tell us a little bit about the new record that's coming out, what the plan is, and talk about some specific things that are coming up over the next few months that are going to be very, very, very exciting and very big things for As You Like It?
Definitely. We're in a very exciting moment right now with this record from Christina Chatfield. She's been integral to As You Like It since our inception. Her music is amazing and always has been. She works a full-time job at Apple. She has not had the time to put out music in a way that she would love to, and I would love for her to. So it's very natural that our first release was from her. It includes remix from Noncompliant, who's also one of my oldest friends, and Tin Man, who's one of As You Like It's oldest friends, Lily Ackerman, who is one of our residents, who now lives in Berlin, and Tape Goes, he's somebody who you're going to hear about for a while. He's a very special artist, and his Nightseed project is also amazing. So that first release coming together in that way really is the springboard for what's next. And we decided to, instead of having sub-labels, have one label and have different branches of the label. And the original branch, the original branch is Sequoia, and Sequoia, and they're made up of different trees that are local trees. So Sequoia 001 is Christina Chatfield. The second release is Oak 001, and that is a nonprofit side of the label, which is going to be used for social justice, where we're going to be donating the proceeds for the first one to Lyric Organization, which is an outstanding local organization for queer youth. And it's going to amplify Black voices. And we're going to feature artists that both live here as producers and also artists that lived here and have since left. And we've got 13 artists so far confirmed. I'm going to hold on to those names for a little bit. But I am working with Gregory Wu, Gregory Clark, and Will Freeman on that. Gregory's working on the curation with me, and Will is working on the design element of it. We have the following release is RDS, which is an artist that I discovered at Underground SF. He has a full LP that we're going to release as a cassette, as well as a vinyl version, a vinyl of 4-track vinyl of it, which includes some of the remixes. RDS is his name's Artelon. He grew up in Michigan, but he lives here with the roots here. Like I said, it's very important. Prince Thomas is doing a remix. Lando is doing a remix. Osborne from Ghostly is doing a remix. Ida is doing a remix, who's a Vancouver artist who now lives here. And Alexa, Ryan Mary's new brand, new productions, is also doing a remix for that. So there's going to be, it's the first time we're doing a cassette, so it's a new platform to put these out. But cassettes were always very important to Johnny, and that was something that he had put out cassettes. He had so having that element of that within it. Then we have an EP coming from Derek Scott, the rhythmist, who's an old school San Jose artist, is released on Resource Records. And then we have an artist, Tape Ghost, gets his first EP with us, which is absolutely beautiful. Every time I share it with an artist, they're already asking for the files. Casamase, who's an old friend, Donano Dazi, who's an old friend, Dave Aju, and Indy Niles are all doing remixes on that.
Awesome.
So it's like there's these things that are like, thinking out in the future into this next year is like, we've got the next year lined up. We've got releases that are coming every 2 months to every 3 months.
That is awesome. That is fantastic, and it's no small feat, right? So having all of this happen, in a way, it's kind of a blessing that we are in this period of downtime, because it feels like, from a practical production ramp up, promoting the label, all of that piece of it, this is a fantastic time to be able to focus your time and effort and energy on something like that. So that is fantastic, Jeremy, and congratulations on that. We've got about 8 minutes left, and while the time that we have left, there are two things I want to talk about. The first one is you have a big event coming up in November. Can you talk to me a little bit about that?
Sure. It's going to be a connection to our regular monthly Coast to Coast series, where we're taking the month off of that to do a release event. Non-Compliant, who's on that release, is a part of it. Tin Man, who's also on it, is a part of it, as well as Tape Ghost and Christina. And they're all putting together original streaming events. We're basically creating an event to broadcast, showcasing that first release. It's Thanksgiving weekend. The label is launching November 27th in relationship to the 4-year anniversary of the Ghost Ship Fire. And so it's all kind of been building towards this event. It's a very exciting event to be able to showcase all of those artists. Unfortunately, Lily was not able to be on this broadcast, but the rest of that release is. And hopefully going forward that we'll continue to do those types of events where there is these release events that are happening, and we'll take those months off of the Coast to Coast series, and we'll be able to put these out. So yeah, it's a big event for us. Only it's our anniversary. It's our 10-year, which actually was in August. I thought there was going to be an October event for it, but it ended up being that this was how we needed to go out. We needed to do this event and showcase where we are now and where we're going forward.
Absolutely. And I think it is a great combination of things to all kind of intersect at the same time. And, the one last question that I have for you here, Jeremy, is that you alluded to Oak being a branch of As You Like It, which focused on social justice. Now, considering the day, considering where we are in the pandemic, considering where we are with Black Lives Matter and social justice issues. And social justice issues, to me, also extend, to all marginalized communities that exist under the umbrella of where we are in this country. Where do you see As You Like It threading in and out of that conversation? Because I know that's important to you.
Yeah, I mean, it's something I take very seriously, and that's my plan, is to do as much letting other people speak than letting us speak, and being a platform for marginalized communities to have a voice, to feel like they're supported, to make that extra effort to showcase and disseminate correctly this amazing music that's was already in the plans, but it kind of fell into this moment that we're living through. As a cis white male, like, my voice isn't important right now, and there's so many other voices that need to be heard before my voice is heard, and that's where I am feeling the most release. Like, I feel the most joy when I'm able to put someone on and they're able to shine, and we're able to give them the YouTube from their stream or the podcast and with their interview, and they're able to disseminate out and showcase how their voice matters, what their voice is, what they're doing. And that is something that I don't take lightly. And I think that we're in a moment right now where that's where our role is. And our role is to kind of step back and at the same time push forward and act as a force that of using the opportunities that we have that they don't, and the network that we already have, the work that we've already put in, and build that towards something that's longevity, long lasting. And I feel that for us to have the legs for as long as I'd like to take this, it's going to have to that's going to have to be interjected in it. It's going to have to include that also.
Absolutely. Well, Jeremy, congratulations on 10 years of As You Like It. Congratulations on the launch of the record label, and the first drop is Christina Chatfield's record that's coming out. So we'll keep an eye out for that and put it on blast in one of the Dancing About Architecture series when it gets dropped. And then thirdly, super excited to tune in to that 10-year anniversary show. Thank you so much for being here. Remember, everybody, that the community that you want is only as strong or weak as you participate in it. So go vote, call someone and tell them that you love them today. Put out good vibes per Jeremy's request. And thank you again, Jeremy, so much for being part of the Architects and Heroes live stream show. And yeah, thanks, man.
Thank you for having me. It was fun.
Okay, and next week, guys, we have Daedalus, Ninja Tunes recording artist. Daedalus is going to join us from his ice cold bunker in Boston, where he is now teaching at Berkeley College, Berkeley School of Music, which is pretty awesome and crazy. So, Jeremy, again, As You Like It, one more time, we've got 10-year anniversary coming up. We've got the Christina Chatfield record coming up, and we've got Jeremy, who's just an overall awesome dude, making incredibly good things happen in San Francisco. Thank you, sir.
Thank you again for having me.
All right, thanks, guys.